Hello, hello. Welcome to one more of our 21-day challenge on awakening your spiritual neurons empire. My name is Johan Stredet. Today is the 19th day. We are almost there, people. I am so excited because I know it's been quite a challenging journey to get into this inner work and all I can say is that it's just a blessing to, first of all, to be here sharing with you, you know, part of my story, and at the same time, part of my journey. I think that the most important thing in every uh, human being, every soul, is the experiences of life that that person has lived and the stories that that person has to tell. And that is why today we're going to talk a little bit about why your story matters. Okay. And I'm going to start with a little kind of like scientific poem that I put in the chapter of my book regarding uh, why the story matters. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it. Okay. The only story that is not worth telling is the one that you haven't lived. The only memories not worth mentioning are the ones that you have not created. The only journey that is not worth living as a legacy is the one that you have never done before. Your story is your reference of where you come from and the compass to your destination. So let your story be the wisdom of your consciousness, the awareness to create new conscious mind, and the expression of yourself, the soul. I wrote a couple of notes that I think that are very important to consider when talking about the story because there's something that we need to have clear when we're talking about uh, our own personal story to other people. Okay. And the way I see it, I mean, we can always take a look at it from the victim side or from the hero's side, right? And the fact is that for a long time, whatever it is that you have passed through, right? Even though that there has been situations in which you have suffered, or well, we all suffer actually, and guess what? We're going to continue suffering. It's part of life. But if we take a look at it from the suffering perspective, what's happening is that we're still feeling in our brain repetitive memories that, oh my God, I am such a victim, and that's not going to solve anything, right? So part of that hero's journey that we have been talking about, and we're not making reference to the movies. The movies are the reference, of course, of a hero journey, when where the guy actually gets into the adventure, gets into the unknown. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He has to face demons and stuff like that, and then at the end of the day he comes with the elixir and he finds I mean freedom and joy. Okay, but in reality, what happens is that we are actually uh, making reference to your personal awakening to a greater consciousness, right? Remember, we have been talking in previous series, right, that you're moving your old self-image, right, and shifting that stagnant conscience that is being unconscious in reality, right, to a conscious awareness. And because of that, and hear me out again, right? I mean, spirituality or enlightenment It's nothing else than bringing darkness into light, bringing everything that we have uh, repressed into the light. Okay. But it doesn't mean that whatever we have here that we have repressed, that we're just gonna like throw it out to the world, right? To hurt people and to hurt ourselves and stuff like that. No, right? Part of the spiritual journey is to look at your story as the source of wisdom, okay? The source of the lessons that you have learned from your past. And I'm going to go back again to one of the phrases that I put in the very first chapter. And I mentioned this on the very first series, right? You can actually go back to series number one when we talked about connecting the points. And I always remember that phrase, connecting the points, because this is something that I had to learn when I was in college. I remember I was doing a business course, and we were talking about Steve Jobs, right? When he founded Apple, um, of course, I mean, he had great ideas, but it came to a point that, even, his own team and the people actually that were investing on his company, they kick him out. He was literally kicked out of Apple. So then he went out. He actually created Pixar. He created all their, I mean, he decided to come and he bought Apple back again. But he said something that the lessons that he actually learned from that experience, he only was able to resignify, right, those experiences because he went back into the past, he analyzed, he reviewed everything that has happening over there, and he came back stronger. So, in that sense, he said, you cannot connect the points by looking forward. You can only connect the points by looking backwards, right? So, even though that your story has been, you know, a huge novel in your mind, that can be a fantasy for some people. But in reality, if they exist in your mind, if they have been created in your mind, that means that they are part of your personal experience. It doesn't matter if it has been converted into a subjective memory or not, but they are part of your history. Now, looking back again to, and this is the purpose actually of uh, awaken your spiritual uh, journey into higher levels of consciousness, is precisely to go back there, take a look, not with the emotion repressed, but with cold-hearted and cold turkey feet at your story, to see what did you learn from the past. And also, here's a secret, right? uh, the only way for you to understand the power that you really have on your story is to understand that when you look at your story, not as a victim, but also as a, or rather, not also, but rather as a vulnerable, okay? The word vulnerability, it's very powerful. And it's powerful because it creates reference. Okay. So when you look at your story, and I'm going to say something that it may be a little bit strong, but please don't shoot the messenger, right? You have to take a look at the story also from the perspective of your fuck ups. And hear me out again, right? Your story is not only, right, from the victim side, is also from whatever it is that you actually in the past put yourself into those experiences that and to repeat those memories in your mind over and over and over and over and over again, right? So the best way to understand it is, with simple words, with the words that people usually use, right? So one of the key elements of looking at your story is looking at those fuck ups, looking at those apparent mistakes, right? At the end of the day, they're not mistakes. They are wisdom. They are lessons, right? But most important, they are the reference that you are giving to future generations. This is something that at an age of 56 years old, right? I tell my kids that everything that I have actually passed through in life, that everything that I have actually done in life, right? Of course, at the beginning, it didn't really have too much of a meaning because I didn't understand, why those things happened to me. But once, like I started, remember the attack method that I explained to you a couple of sessions ago? Well, once I accepted the fact that I passed through those situations, I took responsibility from them. I started evaluating, what was the cause of those situations. And then, I evaluated and extracted lessons from there. My mind started to resignify all those thoughts. Eventually, of course, I found that there was no one else to guilt, to actually to blame or to throw the guilt at it. But the only thing that I could do was to take responsibility for my own actions, take responsibility, right, for my own steps. At the end of the day, your past is only the steps that you have been taking to get you to where you are today, right? So you need to understand that your story, right? It's and I use the word, screw ups or fuck ups, right, for you to understand it in a literally, it's not a judgment, right? It's uh, a wisdom. You need to understand that the only way that you gain wisdom is through the experiences that you have already lived. That's what I wrote in the message, and in the poem actually that I wrote, right? That the only memories that are not worth mentioning are the ones that you have not created. But in order for you to create memories, you need to live, right? The apparent mistakes or the apparent situations that you have lived in the past, they have made you, right, in part, the structure, right, that you are building today. And when we're talking about awakening your neurons uh, empire, it means taking your story, the one as you know it, right, analyze it, put it together, put the story together in real time, with the real things that, that are part of your story that only that only consciously and honestly, that you have passed through, right? Put them up together and then start analyzing, okay, this is good, this is something that I can use, this is part of my story that is garbage, doesn't really serve me a purpose anymore, whatever it is, right? And then with that knowledge, with that wisdom, you create a reference. And that reference, guess what? That's what you share with the world. That is what you actually leave as the compass to someone who, at this point in time, might be lost, might be suffering, might be crying in silence. One of the things that you need to remember is that whatever it is that you have passed through, right, and the words that you don't say are the words that possibly a soul that is lost is not going to have the chance to hear. And maybe that soul is not going to be able to heal. because he hasn't got that reference. Okay. um, for the people who are listening to this and who are actually in that journey of transforming themselves into a higher consciousness, right? We have been talking about resignifying our story, resignifying ourselves, right? To make it part of what we want to do to contribute, right? To improve the world. The world at this point in time, believe me, everybody, well, you know it, I know it. I mean, it's suffering, is all upside down, right? So people need to start looking at themselves with a sense of urgency in regards to self-love. They People need to discover that before they can actually love someone else, they need to start loving themselves. They need to start having self-compassion for themselves. They need to start looking at the story with the self-compassion that they need. That is called, this is what I call, and this is a very important portion, that I had the opportunity to work a lot when I was actually doing psychotherapy, and at the same time when I was teaching neuroscience while passing through my, let's say, awakening my consciousness process. And it was exploring and paying attention to my inner child, right? That inner child in me, it was so hurting, it was so abandoned, not by the others, but by myself. You understand what I'm saying? I hope these words, can touch your heart. It comes to a point that you need to touch, right, your heart and look at that inner child that is in there, that is calling your attention, that is knocking at the door and saying, please hug me. Please, you know, tell me something. Tell me that you love me. Tell me that you are the person that is important to me. That inner child is the one that is looking at you, that is waiting for you, right? To hug him, to give him the attention that nobody gave him in the past. And that's the reason why that inner child got repressed. So you owe it to yourself when you talk about your story, right? You talk in a way that, and here's the thing, right? I mean, being the real hero is sitting up with your inner child and telling him, okay, listen, I know that we had situations in the past that we suffer a lot. All right. But the thing is that we have been walking with this poison, with this anger, or with this hate, or with this sadness, or we have been walking all over, bleeding our wounds into other people. And we cannot do that anymore. We need to understand that at this point in time, it is up for us, right, to get out and to show the world that we are greater than those problems, independent and despite whatever it is that, you know in our ignorant consciousness we have done, because we didn't actually have the consciousness of certain things, but today we do. So when you're talking to your inner child in a realistic way, right, you are actually loving that inner child. You're actually loving yourself in the first place, right? So that is why your story matters. And it should matter first of all to yourself. I can tell you that from my own experience, right? Even though if the project that I am actually doing, if let's say that tomorrow, something happens. And for some reason, I'm not able to continue with my story, right? But something that I can tell you is that just passing through the experience of writing my own story, writing my own uh, personal details to myself, and making and bringing to the awareness the fact that yes, I passed through a lot of situations. That already makes me a hero because I overcome those situations, right? But the real hero in me relies on taking a look at that story and saying, wow, I was able to overcome all those stuff. At that time, I didn't know too many things. Today, right, I have much more wisdom. So I can take that story, and mold it back again, resignify it. I can put the pieces together in such a way that I can become authentic, that I can actually uh, express myself in the way that I wanted it to express, when I was a child, with love, with compassion to myself, and then to others, right? There's of course kind of like a learning curve into that process that I mean, for some of us it's going to take us 10, 20, 30 years. For some others it's going to take them 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, right? I don't know what the stories of your lives are, right? I know my story, and that's why I am making it important. I am making my story matter because it is actually allowing me to sit with myself, allowing me to sit with my inner child, right? Hug him, sit with him, and say, hey, buddy, I mean, we are good, we are tough because we did pass through all that stuff, right? And from this moment on, everything that happened in the past, right, is just a reference. You see, everything that we have actually discussed in this series has been because of bringing to the awareness, right, that despite any situation, any limiting beliefs that we have had, right, they have been the fuel to make us move on. Okay. So we have spoken about the inner child, we have spoken about um, the source of wisdom in our story. We have talked about connecting the points of the past to understand the present so we can actually build a better future, a meaningful future. And we have talked about making a reality check of our past in terms of recognizing what is it that we really have had put ourselves into, right? So we can use those as a reference. So, what's the challenge now? What's next? Well, is simply, sitting with yourself and listen, that whatever it is, right? I mean, you can actually close your eyes, and this is something we're gonna experience something a little bit um, joyful today. I want you to close your eyes for a minute, take a deep breath, and go back to your memories. You can actually sit in the theater of your imagination where a movie is going to start rolling. And then in that movie, the first thing that you're going to see is a little child. And I want you to take a look at that child. I want you to take a look at how is that child dressing? What is he doing? Who is that child with? Right? Look at the expression of the child. Look at the face. Look at the hands. Is that child um, feeling well or feeling sad? Whatever. What's the temperature? Is he playing inside? Is he playing outside? Or is he not playing? Whatever it is that he's doing, I want you to take a look at the eyes of that child. Look at it. Get into the eyes of that inner child that is in front of you and feel it. Feel whatever it is that that child has to tell you. Connect with it. Connect with the inner child in a compassionate way and ask him, how can I serve you? What can I do to love you more? Ask that inner child with all your heart, deeply and sincerely. Ask him, what is it that he or she needs to express to you? And simply listen to that child. Listen. Allow yourself to listen to your inner child's voice. Back in 2000, you can actually open your eyes if you want. I know I'm leaving that wound open for you, but there's a reason why. Because I want you to spend time today, you know, giving importance to the most important person in you, which is yourself, but mostly to your inner child. Back in 2006, right before I started doing therapy, I had the opportunity to go and meet this person. Uh, he was a psychologist, and we had a very deep conversation. But one of the things that he told me, and I didn't realize at that point, was we were talking in his kitchen, in the kitchen of his house, and he asked me, who is that child that is sitting, by your side? And I was like, what child? I look around, I didn't see any child. And he said, well, there is a child in there. you know I was like, well, I don't know. I was like, well, can you think of any possible child? And I remember that at that time, I started, when he asked me the question, I kind of like related, other children, you know. I related my son, I related other children, I used the imagination. And the guy was just looking at my face. He didn't give me any answers. He didn't give me anything. He just told me, okay, well, there is a child in there that is calling your attention, and you need to start paying attention to that child. I was like, okay, fine. Then when I finished the session with this guy, he he didn't charge me anything for that session. He only asked me to buy his book, and his book was precisely on awakening the soul in his own version, let's say. And he told me, before I left, he told me something that it was probably the most meaningful word or sentence that he said. He told me, listen to your heart. I went out, and it's funny though, because it took me like about 15 days to self-realize that that child that he was making the reference to, it was my inner child. It was the child that was wounded, the child that was quiet, the child that was oppressed because of everything that has gone through. So it was about time that I started paying attention. And that's why I decided, right, to do what I needed to do. I needed to get help. I needed to actually sit with somebody who could help me understand my inner child, awaken it, confront him, right? But most importantly, love him. And it wasn't with the therapist. I mean, I went with the therapist to help me become my own therapist, become my own self analyst. And this is the reality that we need to face when we are suffering. Believe me, there is no, sorry, there is no other way unless you look inside and start paying attention with your heart, not with your mind, but with your feelings. Awaken Your Spiritual Neurons Empire is a book to be felt, not to be just read. Okay, I want you to have that clear in your mind. Anyhow, um, today is a wonderful day, but it is also an opportunity. Sorry, something's happening in my mouth. But it is also an opportunity, right, to take care of yourself. Take care of that inner child. He is there and he is actually calling for you. And believe me, the minute that you start listening, he's going to tell you a lot of stories. He's going to tell you a lot of nice things that you probably don't remember that are worth remembering because those stories are the ones that are going again that are going to create resignified memories that are going to become the reference to other generations, to your son, to your daughter, to your kids, to your grandsons, right? And then you're going to start seeing that that inner child that once he wanted to change or she wanted to change the world, it's actually waking up and bringing all his dreams to manifestation so he can actually express and change the world with his own story. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I'll see you on the next series of Awaken Your Spiritual Neurons Empire.